Hello, my name is Ana Paula Enriquez, and I'm going to discuss about the topic of the Dual Heritage National Project from the three different perspectives, which are the state, the indigenous communities, and international organizations. Previously, I read the case study Problematic, where it stated the questions of whether it is possible for the recognition of ethnic diversity to exist alongside the recognition of equality, if the constitutional recognition be sufficient to eliminate those persistent material inequalities which have been previously described, and how should a modern state be configured in order to ensure the integration of cultural diversity and creation of a real climate of equality and equity. Starting with the indigenous communities' perspective and their proposal of San Andres Treaty, I believe that when they created such treaty, they integrated on it all the demands, needs, and necessities they had as a community. Personally, I think that the creation of this treaty generates better opportunities and rights for the community, and the fact that it is not carried and respected by the government, it leaves the community with no hope and in conformity, and by interfering with it, they are contradicting the liberal principles in the Constitution. Another problem they face is that previously the government promised and established reforms in order to ensure equality and equity. Nevertheless, there has not been any attempt to apply them. A solution for this is to understand whether this unwillingness comes from, and from the start fixing the problem to end the oppression and appliance of the hegemonic power the state has. Secondly, I am going to analyze it from the government's perspective. As far as I understand, the Mexican Constitution has to be respected and followed by everyone because in it there are laws and specifications that take care and protect all Mexicans, and having autonomous regions could affect it. The state should be able to govern and impose this in all regions, the national territory, and if a community has certain needs or demands that they believe are not fully fulfilled, then by the legislative part and system, there could be rearrangements or creations of new reforms that fulfill them, as it happened with the case study. On the other hand, the strengthening of indigenous communities has evidenced the consequence of such instability in the actual system. One of the demands of the indigenous community is that these reforms that were supposed to help and protect the community have not been applied. Constitutional recognition has not been sufficient to eliminate the persistent inequalities indigenous communities have been facing, and the new implementations threaten their lands, disregard their rights, and reduce their participation. Finally, I'm going to discuss the case study based on the perspective of international organizations. The relationship between the Mexican government and the indigenous communities has been lost in the last few decades, followed by violations to the most basic rights and respect. Seeing it from a global perspective, the dialogue and respectful communication is essential to integrate cultural diversity with the legislative part. A system of international solidarity was produced that supports the indigenous communities in Chiapas. Its main objective is to avoid a warlike solution to be the rebellion, and it is made up by the flow information news, speeches, and complaints about the living conditions of the indigenous people in this place, making it accessible to other social contexts, validating it before local public opinion, and organizing to put pressure on the Mexican government. To conclude, I believe that in order to create a modern state that ensures the integration of indigenous communities, we all need to stop trying to include or just accepting indigenous groups as if they were some outsiders trying to fit in. Instead, we need to embrace and absorb these cultures into our own lives. Another solution can be the creation and implementation of effective policies that take minorities' necessities into consideration and are based on the dialogue between both parties.